Hey everybody, we are in the 39th conversation, I think. So 39, it's been going for a while now, and turning the seasons, spring is sprung. It's officially sprung like a month ago or more than a month ago, but it's feeling pretty toasty here in Austin, and stuff is happening in the world. People are coming out of hibernation in the northern hemisphere. So I want to talk first on this episode of the conversation about energy, which is like Josiah's passion. Um, no, so basically Europe, mostly Spain and Portugal, but also like other parts of Europe were hit by a massive blackout for like 8 hours or something. Uh,
18.
was it 8 hours?
Well, it was, so interesting thing about blackouts is they might all start at the same time. It starts at the same time, but they don't all get power back at the same time. So I think the figure that I see going around is 18 hours.
Oh, okay.
Some people I'm sure had power before that. Some people maybe it lasted a little bit longer, but overall, just I mean a day. Call it a day, right? Um, and yeah, I mean it would basically um like the entire Iberian Peninsula, so Spain and Portugal, a little bit of France, it seems like, but mostly it was stopped there because France disconnected um itself from from that part of the grid, which you kind of have to do in order to limit the damage. But yeah, a couple of things to say about this. First, like broadly, we still totally don't know what happened. Um, we know there was some sort of big event that had to do with big swings in voltage. So like the grid system, it has to operate at a certain frequency. Uh, Here in the U.S. and Canada, we use 60 hertz. In Europe, they use 50 hertz. It doesn't really matter. It's just what the equipment is designed for. And if it deviates from that significantly, it can, damage the equipment, solve problems. So the whole system is basically, and it could damage the power plants. So the whole system is kind of set up where if you deviate too much from the right frequency, things just shut down or they disconnect. They automatically disconnect from the grid. And so that's kind of what happened. We don't know what caused it. There was some major swing in voltage, which basically caused a bunch of demand supply to just disappear almost instantaneously, and that took down the grid. And probably, um, what my suspicion is that when we find out exactly what happened, there will be multiple causes, right? In the same way that when you have an airplane crash, I think it's typical that an airplane crash typically involves, maybe five or six different things going wrong, right? Because obviously they don't want planes to crash, and so they build in a lot of redundancy and fail safe. So usually a plane can handle, two or three things going wrong, right? Not if someone shoots a missile at it, okay, fine. But in general, like a lot of things are manageable unless something else bad happens at the same time, right? So my suspicion is that's also kind of true with the electric grid. So my suspicion is that there's probably it's going to be complicated because even when all the details are out, people are going to want to point fingers at each other, and say, "Oh, well, if it hadn't have been for A, the collapse wouldn't have happened." If the people say, "Well, if it hadn't been for B, the collapse wouldn't have happened," and that's all true because it's like multi-causal. Um, there's obviously maybe the best thing to do would just be to wait until all the facts are in or whatever. But of course, we have the internet, so people like to speculate. And two things that I think were out there, um, people kind of turn to that may or may not be true. One is this could be a cyber attack, right? Now, it doesn't seem to be any evidence that it's a cyber attack, but in theory, that would be a way to explain, like like why did the voltage just like why did the frequency just suddenly go screwy? There's no obvious apparent reason for it, right? So that's something that people were speculating about. But a lot of the speculation had to do with renewable energy. Spain has a lot of renewable energy on the grid, primarily solar. And there was, I think, just like a week before the blackout, that Spain had its first 100% renewable energy day, where like all the electricity during that 24-hour period was produced by uh, wind plus solar plus hydro, basically. And so, people have speculated that um, this had something to do with it, and it's possible. It's possible that renewables could have played a role in the picture, but I don't. I at this point, I don't know that I would say that that's likely. Um, One thing that people say is, and this is a little nerdy, so I apologize, but when you most traditional power plants, the way that it's kind of funny, despite like a lot of really advanced technological developments, for the most part, the way we generate electricity is we heat up water, and so then it becomes steam, and then we use the steam to spin a turbine. You know, um, and so that's true. For a nuclear plant, it's true for a gas plant, it's true for all sorts of other stuff, and um, that if there were to be some sort of disruption, right, in the frequency or something else, um, that turbine will continue to spin for a while because of momentum or inertia, however you want to both. People use both terms, and so that in the electricity system, that can provide a little bit of stability in the grid, right? Like if you have a little brief hiccup, in the same way that if you have a fan in your bedroom that's spinning and you turn it off, the fan doesn't stop as soon as you turn off the electric switch, right? It keeps spinning for a while. And so there's a theory that because solar in particular, it doesn't have inertia, it's photovo- photovoltaic, there's no turbines involved, that that could make the grid fragile, right? To these sorts of events. So that is possible. I will say from talking with people, um, you know, Spain does have still a decent amount of non-solar based generation. I mean, they have a fair amount of nuclear power. They've got a lot of hydro. They've got a little bit of gas and biomass. So it seems like they probably have enough inertia that wasn't the issue. But we'll find out, right? I think the bigger issue is whenever you have a uh, event like this, a disaster or whatever, people kind of it can get very complicated, and so people kind of want to go to their like hobby horses or whatnot, and for some people that's renewable energy. They know that that's bad, so it must be at fault. It could be, there could be something where had there been less renewable energy on the system, that things would not have turned out that way. But we don't know yet, and maybe not, right? And it could also be the case that renewable energy would have played a role, but um, better management also would have prevented it. So I don't know. That's
Mhm.
my preliminary thoughts.
Well, I mean, okay, so I guess, we had so in the United States, we have 3 grids. We have the East Coast, West Coast, and Texas. Texas is a separate grid,
Right.
and, that gives us some flexibility, but it also gives a little less redundancy. We had a I was like, the Texas listeners, and I know there are some of them, was it like was it 2022 now or 2021? It's 2021, right? That we had
Yeah.
the blizzard.
21.
About
Yeah.
4 years ago, And, a lot of us, like, I didn't have power. I mean, I had gas and water, but I didn't have, like, electricity for 4 days, I think. It was from, like, Sunday it was basically from, like, Sunday night, until, for me, Thursday. Other people were, like, longer than a week, and then some people were, like, a couple of days. I think you had electricity the whole time, right?
I did, yes.
Yeah,
I lost water, ultimately,
which is
but yeah.
yeah.
So the difference between what happened here in Texas and what happened in Spain is that in Spain, the whole event seems to have played out over a matter of a couple of seconds, whereas with Texas, you had a similar thing where there was frequency deviation. In that case, we know what it was. It was, weather related. Plants were ceasing to operate. Um, but they had, enough time. There was a period of 9 minutes where they were able to kind of shed load. And so you had, instead of in Spain, where the entire system went down, in Texas, they just did forced outages for about 40%, about half of load, maybe. So, and in theory, they were supposed to rotate those. In some places they did, so the idea was, okay, we don't, supply has to match demand, right? At all times. And so if you lose half your supply, you're not going to be able to cover half demand. And so what you could do is you could just switch back and forth. So you say like, okay, half the state gets electricity for 90 minutes, then they're off for 90 minutes, the other half gets their electricity, and you go back and forth. And that's unpleasant for everybody, but it's not the same as, spending a couple days freezing in your apartment. But they were not able to do that. The rapidity and for other failures, m- most of the state you were either on the entire time or you were off the entire time. Uh,
Yeah. Whoa, I know, yeah.
yeah, yeah. And so that was a huge thing. So um, you know, there the other the other big blackout in living memory, which I'm sure you remember this, Razib. Some of our listeners maybe are too young, but in the early 2000s, there was a big blackout in the Northeast, right? New York, and I think it went all the way to like Ohio through New England.
It was a summer blackout, right?
Yes, right, yeah, and so that blackout um, was basically um, I believe what happened is a power line went down, right, because a tree branch hit it or something. So there's no unusual, there wasn't a huge winter storm or anything like that, but power line went down. But the sensor uh, that would have told you, okay, this power line is down, wasn't working, right? And so instead of, normally the grid would have just adjusted to that, but instead it was not able to adjust, and so the thing just kind of like built up and it dominoed. So that's, I think, kind of a classic case of how intricate this grid system is. Where if you're not on
Yeah.
if you're not on top of things, right, it can just the whole thing can collapse, right? Um,
Yeah, yeah, I didn't read it, but I have a book on the Kindle about, like, the grid and how it's at risk and stuff, and we have an old grid. I mean, what about that sort of stuff? Like, is that a legit thing?
yeah, I mean, I do think so. A lot of our infrastructure is like dates from the kind of post-war period, 1945, 1965. We did a lot of stuff. And that's true in energy. I mean, it's true like of our water systems, our sewage systems, like the New York. I mean, someday, if the water system in New York, which they keep putting off repairs to, like it just could fail, and so that's a big problem. There's other things with like roads or whatever, but with the electric system, I don't think the situation overall is that bad, but there are some key components to the grid system that are very hard to build, and we don't build them anymore, and they take a long time. Like they take several years uh, under normal circumstances to like order a new one. So potentially that could be, I think, a pretty big problem if something happens to damage those key components. Um, and
I mean, I do have to say the 2021, the blizzard, the outage in Texas, it showed us, a lot of us at the time, the downside of the just-in-time world. People were hunkering down and, we were eating beans and, luckily we had the stove and we had water going, but, you know, uh I mean, it was dark. I mean, it was the middle of winter, so it's not like we had that much sunlight in the beginning. It's the sunset pretty early, so it was, like, dark a lot of the time. We were, I my heat is electric,
yeah,
um,
right.
and so, it was
And all the
cold.
gas stations are run like the pumps don't work if there's no electricity either. So that's a fun.
Yeah, yeah. So, we were in the car a lot, turning the car on, and, we were worried about gas, and so, it was really icy, uh, and, like, there was, like, all sorts of, like, crashes that were happening because people in Austin are not used to driving, and, our neighbor, my neighbor Wayne, he actually got us some gas. He, like, walked down the road, just, like, got it in, like, whatever, just manually just got us some gas and brought some gas back, so that was really a lifesaver, like, "Thank you,
Yeah,
Wayne." I was like, Wayne, as some of you might know, he lives a little rough, and he was just like, I don't know what people are complaining about,
right.
It's like, so that was really interesting. My neighbor had to walk to his office because he ran out of food because he didn't really keep food in the house, he just ordered,
Yeah,
you know? Like
right.
a lot of people. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is, I think, I'm I I'm a little bit of a low key soft prepper myself, where I try and keep uh, a decent amount of supplies in the house and for any sort of emergency, which is very tough when you have kids, because they eat everything.
Yeah.
Go through it all very, very quickly. Uh,
Maybe just get spinach or something, maybe a canned spinach,
yeah, but
like stuff that kids don't you know?
right, right. But yeah, I mean, I think that there is some wisdom to like, I mean, maybe not going full Mormon with like 2 years food supply or whatever, but there is wisdom, I think, to and um, just over the past few years, um, having a little stockpile like that it's come in handy. I mean, it came in handy with COVID. It came in handy with the blackouts, and it's come in handy a couple other times too. Where there's been uh, either some sort of supply chain disruption or some sort of event or whatever. So I would definitely recommend it um, to people. You never have to find yourself in a place where um, you're going hungry because you can't, the restaurants are not open or,
Yeah,
uh,
yeah. Yeah, that's for sure. So what's up with this, the Texas is passing a law to discourage renewables. I don't know. I didn't
uh,
read the article,
yeah.
but I've seen stuff about it. Tell me the real story.
Well, so there are several bills.
Actually, give them the context of, the fact that we are actually a massive renewable state.
Yes. So the first thing to know, yeah. So that's a very good point. So Texas is number one for wind, and I believe we're number one for utility scale solar. Right. I think California is still ahead of us for rooftop solar, but we are, and this is despite the fact that we basically have, we don't, I mean, we have very little in this form of like state based supports for renewables. There aren't a huge number of restrictions. There are some, but yeah, I mean, Texas, because of our kind of open grid system, we have a market-based grid system, and we have a market-based. We make it easy to build things in general, and then you make it very easy to hook things up to the grid if people want to. So that has really encouraged a lot of wind and now more solar and some storage as well. And that's also kind of provoked some backlash. And so there are a couple of bills um, right now. There's that are I would describe as being restrictive on renewables. So there's one bill that would set up a kind of permitting system for wind and solar, and it includes like a half-mile setback requirement. My research indicates that most places that have a setback for wind turbines, it's kind of maybe 300, 400, 500 meters. So a half mile setback that would put Texas. I mean, we would go from best in the nation right now for permitting to kind of the more restrictive than 97% of the nation, something like that, right? And there's other stuff. There's a bill that would say half of all new generation has to be gas, basically. I mean, it's a little bit more complicated, but that's kind of it. And there's other stuff like that. My sense of it is that these bills are unlikely to pass, and this has to do with the kind of internal Texas politics, where in Texas, the battles are often not between Republicans and Democrats; they're between the House and the Senate, right? And that seems to be the case here, where these are pretty much all bills that passed out of the Senate and are in the House, but the House doesn't seem super inclined to do anything with them. So my anticipation at this point is that they will, there's only a couple more weeks before the end of the session. So lots of bills are going to die anyway, and I expect these bills will die along with them. And so Texas will probably continue to be, a pretty good place for all sorts of pretty like any form of energy, really, but in particularly including, uh, you know, wind turbines, solar panels, battery storage facilities, what have you. Data.
What's what is the Trump administration? I mean, I know we're just past 100 days, so
Yeah.
it's pretty early. But what is the Trump administration's like energy policy and guidance like right at this point?
I mean, so it's been a whirlwind 100 days, not just on energy, but in all sorts of other fields. So they've done a ton of stuff. Um, so of they're doing a lot of deregulatory type stuff, um, mostly at EPA, trying to get permitting times down, getting rid of a lot of regulations and programs related to like greenhouse gas emissions, like climate change, that sort of stuff, but also more general stuff as well. Uh, there has been, I would say, some restrictive stuff. Particularly, I think they did some sort of ban about offshore wind, right? For example, and there's other stuff that's related to that. So overall, I mean, the administration is definitely very friendly towards fossil fuels, rhetorically hostile to renewable energy, but we'll have to see, what sort of practical effect that has. The big issue for renewable energy is there's a lot of federal spending, like federal tax credits and other stuff through the IRA, and um, I think the official position of the administration is that they want to get rid of all that, but they have to get that through Congress, and there's a significant number of Republican congressmen who don't want to get rid of this stuff because it benefits their districts or whatever. So we'll have to see how far they can get on it. I'm skeptical that it'll just all go away. But I'm not. I'm not a big fan of energy subsidies generally. So if it does go away, that's great. But I suspect there'll be some sort of reform thing that will happen, and it will happen in typical congressional fashion of lots of nothing, and at the last minute some like back room maneuvering, and then they'll come out with some sort of deal.
I like about like 15 years ago, I think, like maybe like a little less than 15 years ago, during the early fracking boom, David Frum, who today is, kinda more left coded probably, but, he still has some views and had some views that were pretty right wing, like, he's pretty, like, conservative on immigration, but, always has been, but, when it comes to energy, I remember he would always say that America should actually invest in its fossil fuels because it allows us to be independent from Saudi Arabia and Russia and all these countries, and that, like, kind of America and Canada together, could create a North American, like, fossil fuel juggernaut, which kinda did happen, you know?
Yeah.
So what is going on with that? What is going on with fracking, in general? Are we just kinda at a stable equilibrium? And just so the listeners and the viewers know, there was a whole thing before about 2010, really before the financial crisis, about peak oil, and
Mhm.
fracking technology really transformed that, where it's like we are not, talk about what peak oil is and why fracking, obviously, blew that up.
Yeah, I mean, peak oil was kind of a mid 20th century thing, which is basically, if you look historically, um, you know, not every single year, but you have an upward trend. So basically every year we produce more oil than the year before, right? From basically zero, say 130 years ago or some odd. And so peak oil was the idea that, look, we're going to run out like at some point soon. We're going to reach the peak, and then all the easily accessible oil will just be gone. And so every year we'll produce less and less oil, and that will make the price of oil more and more expensive, and it'll have all sorts of other effects, and we got to move off it, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so uh, I don't think that idea ever made a huge amount of sense, but it's certainly been refuted um, by the course of events, especially with fracking, which opened up a lot more resources. And I think when you think about when you're talking about like energy independence or whatever, um, it's tricky because uh, oil is a global market, right? So it's good, when the U.S. produces more oil, that's good for us economically because we get to, we can sell it, and uh, it also lowers oil prices, which is good for other economic activity because it reduces the cost of inputs. But we still aren't independent in the sense that oil has a global price, So uh, what happens in the rest of the world in terms of producing oil still affects the price of oil for us as for everybody else. For natural gas, the situation is a little bit different because there's not really a global natural gas market. That has to do with the fact that traditionally uh, it's more difficult to transport natural gas. You have to liquefy it and then deliquefy it or whatever. Um, and so, you did tend to get huge price differences between the price of natural gas, say in North America versus Europe or Asia. We have been trying to export more natural gas, especially to Europe. They used to get, and I guess still do, a lot of their natural gas from Russia. After the invasion of Ukraine, they don't really want to do that so much anymore, and so we are trying to do more, replace more of that. So there are things like that, but I don't think, um, you know, energy, especially if you're talking about oil, but also other fossil fuels. It's a very important part of our economy domestically and in terms of foreign trade, but it's not the sort of thing where you could. I don't think the idea of like a Fortress America type approach really makes sense, right? You want to be able to produce it so that you can sell it to other places, and we also, in addition to making a lot of oil, we also refine a lot of oil. So so one thing that we do is we import oil from places like Canada, and then we send it down to our refineries, and then we export it again as refined product, right? So that's all very beneficial, but it requires like global trade. It's not we can just lock ourselves off from the world, and what happens in the rest of the world doesn't affect us.
Okay. All right. We've been talking about your favorite topic for like 30 minutes now. Maybe we should
That's right. That's right.
uh move on to something else where I might talk a little bit more because I know some stuff. But you want to talk about the Sami, also called the
Yes,
Lap.
that's
Um,
right.
so I want you. Do you want to give the context? Because
Well, I mean, it was your tweet, so uh, okay. So the Sami, not the Sammy, as I was saying earlier, you chastised me for mispronouncing it. They're called the Sami. I guess there's some sort of like small group in Sweden or whatever who are the only. No, they're not in Sweden.
they're in Sweden, but man, like, okay, let me describe it. Okay, you know what? Like, that was,
Well,
that was
wait.
a bad move. That was a bad move. Okay.
Yeah, I don't. I
Uh,
mean, I don't know what I'm talking about,
yeah, that's fair. Okay, you know
but
what? That's on me. That's on me.
they
Like, you
are
don't
in
even
Sweden.
know which countries these people are in.
I
I mean,
said
you do, but
what?
like, you're just
Yeah, I
like,
said Sweden, and they're in Sweden. So I mean,
yeah,
I guess
okay,
they're
they're in Sweden, Norway, Finland, and also Russia. They basically occupy the crown of Scandinavia, Nordic Peninsula. You know that whole peninsula, really, like the part that's facing the Arctic Ocean, like really the Arctic Ocean in the north. They're there. They're reindeer herders, and they used to live in like these teepee type things, these huts, like 100 years ago. If you Google pictures of the Sami, they're nomadic reindeer herders, and they speak a language distantly related to Finnish. I mean, it's not intelligible, okay? Because like the Finns call themselves the Suomi, and the Sami call themselves the Sami, and so they're related to each other, obviously, but they're not intelligible. And the Sami dialects actually are often not intelligible with each other as well.
yeah, and a Finnish is not. I mean, it's like linguistically, it's separate from all the other languages. So I assume that the
And the Sami language is related to the Finnish language, so they're both part of the Finnic. So the Finnic languages are part of the Uralic languages, which include like Ugric, which is Hungarian, and some Siberian languages, Khanty. And then and so the Sami are basically they're Finnic peoples, but they're not Finnish. Right? So, like, Estonians, Veps, Mari, there's these people in the Urals who are also Finnic peoples. Like, Finnic Permic is the big group. So, it's named after the Finns, who are the most numerous of the Finnic peoples, obviously, but the Finns are the most westerly, and they're very distinct from a lot of the others. Finns and Estonians are very close. I think Finnish and Estonian are I have been told that by a Finnish person that Estonian sounds like baby Finnish, which is ironic because Finnish sounds like a baby language to, I think, most English speakers, just doesn't
uh
sound like an adult language. But anyway, with Sami, they are further removed from them, like, couple of thousand years removed, but it's still obviously Finnic language. And their lifestyle is very unique. They're also the last like in Europe west of Russia, they were pretty much the last pagans, like the Lithuanians. Some of the Lithuanian peasants came close, but there were Sami who were not Lutheran, who were not Christianized into the 1700s.
yeah.
And so the last Sami shamans, like, like some of these European peoples preserve like pagan folk ways. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about like they were still practicing their Siberian shamanic religion as their primary religion. They didn't really know much about Christianity. Like the missionaries had not really gotten to them. Missionaries got to them after 1500, and by 1800 they'd all been converted to Lutheranism. Although some of them, it's recent enough that they're the Sami like drum shamanism. They have a religion where they like do drumming and stuff like that. Some guy, and they were persecuted by these like nation states that are expanding. So the Sami are a nomadic people in the north that are doing reindeer nomadism, right?
Right.
They're herding reindeer. They're moving between the borders, and then you have these post-Westphalian states. So you have, well, I mean, for a lot of this period, Denmark and Norway were, I think, part of the same crown, and then you had Sweden, which became independent again after the breakup of the Kalmar Union, in the 16th century. And Finland is part of Sweden. Okay, so these nation states.
There you go, Sweden. I was right. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, okay, yeah, Sweden. Okay, so they're moving northward and they're moving into Sami territory. Okay, and a lot of the northern part, especially of Sweden, was not. There was no agriculture there, and so there were a lot of Sami actually much further south in Sweden in like 200 years ago than there are today. Today they're really, really in the north. There's like 50,000, 60,000 Sami total. Like the largest number are actually, I think, in Norway, but in any case, um, so they're forcibly converted to Christianity. Like, some guy, there's like stories of like, okay, so one of the stories of like the conversion of the Sami was they had gotten converted and then, like, I think, like, some man's, like, son drowned, like, in a fishing expedition, and he was sad, so he was drumming. And they're
Right.
like, "Oh, you're a pagan."
Right.
Because, like, that's what they used to do when the people would die, they would
He probably
drum.
was a pagan, right?
I mean, probably inward I mean, he probably, like, he was baptized and stuff, but,
I
like,
understand. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
but he was just like, "This is what we did when we were little," and then, like, they burned him or something, whatever, they drowned him, I don't know. So
Right.
these are, like, the stories that the people tell of the Sami persecution. And there are like in marginalized people, like alcoholism, like the standard stuff that you hear about Native Americans, like affects the Sami. And so they're listed as an official indigenous people by the European Union. And like there's like some arguments about this. They tried to community note me, but I was actually correct. Like the European Union recognizes a lot of indigenous people, but the Sami are the only ones within the European Union.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Um,
Yeah,
and
I
so
have the tweet right here, which I'll just read.
yeah.
Uh, the Sami are Europe's only official indigenous people. They are also relative latecomers to Europe compared to their Scandinavian neighbors in cultural terms.
The irony here is so before we had genetics and archaeology and everything coming together, okay, like they're foragers, they're hunter gatherer foragers, they herd reindeer. I mean, they seem kind of primitive. It seems plausible to think that they are, the indigenous. They're like the primal people, and then the Scandinavian farmers moved up and like pushed them. And we know historically that happened. Like the Sami were pushed northwards, right? Um, but but the combination of genetics and archaeology as well as, like, linguistics, basically, we now know that the Finnic people have an origin probably in East Central Siberia about 4,000 years ago, and, they started expanding first to the Ural region, so the Central Ural region. There, they interacted with Indo-Iranian people, and so, I wrote a whole piece on my other Substack about this, but basically, they borrowed a lot of words from Indo-Iranians related to agriculture and pastoralism, and also, the Finnish word for slave is actually derived from the word Aryan because they had like a violent interactions, obviously. Okay, and then eventually they kept pushing northward across what is now northern Russia, which used to be all Finnic speaking before Ivan the Terrible kind of like integrated them in. Like not the state of Novgorod the Great. They had a fur trading empire that went like towards the Urals, but they never did anything like any sort of forced assimilation or Christianization or anything of the Finnic tribes. They were basically like, you give us the furs as tribute and we'll leave you alone. If you don't give us the furs, we will come send an expedition against you. That was Novgorod the Great's deal with the Finnic tribes. When Ivan the Terrible, Ivan Grozny came and he conquered, everything, that he was like, okay, you're going to become Russian now. And so eventually they got Russified. So you have all these Finnish languages in the Urals, and then you have in Finland and Estonia, there's a big gap. Okay. That gap is relatively recent. So the Sami are part of this expansion out of the Urals, and they probably arrived where they currently are between 1000 and 500 BC. Okay. So that's a long time ago. But the issue is, it's almost certainly correct that Scandinavian languages uh, existed in, well, probably in Finland as well, but definitely obviously in Sweden and Norway. and later Denmark, well before this period. And so Germanic Scandinavian languages are older than the Sami. That ethno-linguistic identity is older than the Sami ethno-linguistic identity in that region. So they're being labeled as indigenous, but they're actually newcomers.
Yeah.
But indigenous is supposed to mean that, like, they were there first.
Right, you
So
would think so, although, I mean, I looked I mean, so let me just, say that part of the reason why we're talking this is because you tweeted this, and a bunch of people who I guess don't know how to read, like, got really mad at you in different directions, but yeah, I mean, it does seem a little strange. I looked at one point at the official definition of what you have to be to count as indigenous, and it was very convoluted. I don't remember it all, but like basically, I think the basic idea is, it doesn't matter if you're there first. To be indigenous, you have to be like oppressed somehow. Like someone's got to oppress you or put you on a reservation or something like that, right? It's not enough to actually just be the first people who are in an area, which is what uh, the word connotates. So yeah, I mean, to me, I mean, I know you, of course, and that surely colors the way I read your tweets. However, I think just like if I saw a tweet that was worded the way you had worded it from just some random person, my assumption would be, or at least a plausible interpretation is, okay, this person is making fun of the European definition of what it takes to be indigenous, right? Because he's saying, A, like this group is the only indigenous people in Europe, right? They're not throughout all of Europe. And then B, he mentions that they came later. But a lot of people, I guess, thought that you
okay,
were
th they were
pro.
really funny. Like, let me can I, like, read some of them? Because there's a lot of, like, humor involved, like, a lot
Yeah,
of people.
yeah,
So, but just so the listeners, viewers know, it got 2.4 million views,
right,
okay?
right.
2,500 likes, 453 retweets, 603 bookmarks. Okay, so Tom Russell, who I kind of know, he's really into, like, Indo-Europeans and Germanic paganism and stuff like that. Like kind of like right wing pagan European type guy. He's English. He replies, all Europeans are indigenous, which I think he understood what I was trying to say. I think he's just trying to reiterate something. But Christian Hines, this guy says, pretty sure Europeans are the indigenous people of Europe. Um,
Okay.
and then like some
Not
other
according
people
to
are
the
like,
European Union, which is the
yeah.
European. Yes, but
Oh, some person says, by posting this, you are calling for the death of all white people everywhere in the world. A bold choice. Now, someone else was like, props, this tweet was the greatest retard magnet I've ever seen. Never seen a comment section so hopeless.
uh-huh.
So there was some comments like that. Someone's like, how exactly are they indigenous if they arrived after the Scandinavians? By definition, this cannot be true. Okay, yeah, that's
Yeah.
right.
Right, right. Yeah.
Someone is like, of course, someone's like, sure, Indian buddy. Oh, this guy Liberty Gringos, deport Razib. Um, I don't know what this is coming from, but like about a lot of people are implying that I say Europeans are from space. I guess because they're aliens. Yes, other Europeans came from space. Um, yeah. So I like let me.
So
Oh, you
Indiaism.
stupid fuck. To you, indigenous just means brown. Okay. Uh, um, yeah. There's the similar. Okay, pack up that big brown nose, Khan. You are not wanted. Okay. Um. Oh yeah, this guy, you're an idiot, probably a dangerous idiot. I haven't decided yet. And so some of these people are like, you misunderstood him, and they're like, no, he didn't. He should have been clearer. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, so it's like a lot of that stuff. I got oh, we are going to deport you again. Um, yeah, okay, yeah, some of this stuff is kind of vile. I'm not gonna like, say, okay. Uh, is that meant to sound retarded? Uh, uh, okay, some of the quote tweets are, some of the quote tweets because I got a lot of quote tweets. Bap quote tweeted me, although I think he was, like, a little embarrassed because he didn't really, like, attack like, we don't really get along, so he didn't, attack
Right.
me this time. Um, uh, like, yeah, let's see. Indigenous, yeah, a lot of the quote tweets were, like, making fun of them, but, I mean, I don't know if this is true. The responses to this post proves that the average online rightard has the reading comprehension of a banana. Rightists in general have been slowing dying since World War II intellectually. Where are the survivors? Where are our sharks? I've been chumming the water long enough. There's like pictures of like, people in top hats and shit. I don't know. Someone's asking, what about the Basque? Oh, okay. BAP says indigenous doesn't mean strictly native in leftist speak. Indigenous peoples movements refers to those who are oppressed and displaced by European imperialism. You can argue the Sami are later arrivals to Europe, but left sees a concrete phenomenon, the semantics of it less important. I mean, I guess. I mean, it's still a semantic issue.
It is a
I don't.
semantic issue,
It's
yeah.
still a
I
semantic
mean,
issue, but
y
they
like,
just use it
we're
a different way.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
so, but, I mean, I think ultimately, I think this is, BAP is kind of right in that you I mean, your tweet is pointing out the discrepancy where, on the one hand, like, indigenous, it's supposed to mean, uh, just whoever was there first or whoever's native to the area, something like that. Whereas in practice, the way that liberal institutions treat it, yeah, it's right. It's like you have to be repressed by white people. You have to be oppressed by Europeans.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and another thing is that, there are other words like this. So, for example, I remember, like, seeing, like, a Russian blogger years ago, this is when, like, Jason Kidd was in, was leading the Nets to the, NBA finals, whatever, and they were talking about he was confused because they were referring to Jason Kidd as a black basketball player. So, Jason Kidd, the basketball player, for those of you don't know, he's half white, half black. His dad is probably mixed race himself. You could tell that he has African ancestry, like, in terms of his hair and stuff, but he's pretty light skinned. He's not, like, really that darker than Josiah. And so, he is black, but he's literally not black. And so sometimes, like, people that are not American are just like, "How can you call someone with white skin black?" Like, that's a contradiction.
Right.
But when we use the word black in a racial context, we're not talking about literally the color. I mean, most people are brown, literally, right? And so, like, indigenous is the same. Indigenous has a literal meaning, you know? And in some ways, in the New World, people are pointing out, Australia and the New World, indigenous is fine that way. Like,
Hmm.
they were here first, you know?
Right. Right.
Right? But
Right.
the problem is, like, so in, India, you have people called Adivasis, and I don't know what that, but they're indigenous, like, they're the tribal people. I don't let me see what the, oh, by the way, my friend Leandro had this quote tweet. "Here, Razib has accidentally produced a black hole made of retards that are unable to read 4 lines, most of them in their native language. They came in so vast numbers that even light can't escape the warp space-time created by a huge density of pure dumbass." Anyway, I mean, I found it really funny because, like, and
Yes.
then, like, I would, like, quote tweet it, and then they would still be like, "But you have to agree, like, you're totally retarded, like, you don't know what you're talking about."
Uh-huh.
Um, and then other people were pointing out, what was it? I quoted the Melian dialogues, I
Right.
retweeted, uh, let me see, a Melian.
Strong do what they can, and the weak suffer what they must.
Yeah, about, like, the Rotherham rape gang thing, and then the people were saying, "Oh, like, he's so like, that's so insensitive," and stuff like that,
Right.
and I was just like,
And
yes, it's a
someone
very
said,
insensitive line.
yeah,
That's like
I know
yeah,
someone responded that, like, "Who cares what the king of Athens said?"
and then I was like, "You are so retarded that you think Athens has a king," and he's like, "Who cares if there wasn't a king of Athens?" And I was just like, "Oh my god." Like, you know what I'm trying to say? Like, if I was that retarded,
Yeah,
I
well,
would, like, leave the internet for a little while. No
right,
shame in that game.
right,
Like,
right. Yeah,
who cares that I'm just like, "This is Athens. This is Athens.
right.
How can you think Athens had a king?"
I don't know.
I mean, do you mean, like, do you mean king, Aegeus, I don't know, in the Bronze Age, I don't know. That's
Yeah.
not at least nobody pointed out the Mycenaean period they did have kings, right? But,
Yeah, although, I mean, the dialogue is specifically about the Peloponnesian War.
yes, exactly. So I was just like, "It's about the Peloponnesian War. How could you think Athens had a king? Like,
Right.
you know anything about the Peloponnesian War?"
He doesn't. Yeah, I think that's
So it was an interesting window on, like, the retarded part of Twitter. So I'm actually writing a post, just about Sami genetics. There actually hasn't been that much Sami genetics done, and I know why. It's because 'cause they're indigenous. It
oh,
has to be.
yeah, so they
Because it's real
model
'cause
it.
they 'Cause they're really interesting. They're a little bit like the average Finn is about, like, 5% Siberian. The Sami are closer to, like, 25% Siberian. So they have much more of that ancestral Siberian ancestry. They also have, like, Eastern European hunter-gatherer ancestry that actually has been there since the end of the Ice Age. The Sami are weird in terms of they have the most recent ancestry, but they also have more of the most ancient ancestry. So they have, like, very little farmer ancestry, but they have a lot more forager ancestry because there were people in the north when they got there that they clearly intermarried with because they have very few like the Finns, they have very, very little Siberian mtDNA. It was just a bunch of dudes, and
Yeah,
they had to get.
they had to get women. And why, I mean, maybe it's just how it is, but so they're distinct from they're related to the Finns, but they're distinct from the Finns. So what, like, why are the Finns not indigenous, right? Are they, I mean,
They weren't oppressed long enough, I
they
guess,
were,
but, here's the thing,
oh, they were
the
oppressed
Finns were
too early.
oppressed for, like, 700 years.
Yeah, they were oppressed too early, right? Because if it
Well,
had happened,
but they only stopped being oppressed, but they were oppressed they've not been oppressed for about 100 years. Because under the Russians, they were given
yeah,
some independence. They were kind of
yeah,
oppressed a little bit, you
right,
know? And
yeah,
under the Swedes, they were definitely in terms of, like, if you like, I've been to Finland. If you go to a Finnish cemetery, when the headstones are older, you notice that the older headstones, the ones that are big and nice, they're all Swedish names.
yeah.
They're
So is
all
it,
Swedish
mean,
speakers.
I guess is it more just that they didn't hunt reindeer like they did, like
Well, I mean,
Western?
like, if you Google pictures of Laps, they used to be called Laps, that's supposedly bad now. The Laps is the exonym, right? Sami is the endonym, although they're different Sami tribes, like, the Sami are, like, one people in a way, like, I don't know, the Iroquois are one people. They're actually, like, a coalition of different tribes that are related to each other, but they have very distinct languages. But anyway, um, I think the issue is just that, yeah, the Finns have been independent, they have their own nation state. The Sami are stateless, and,
Yeah,
like, they were, like, living I mean, they lived a really primitive lifestyle relatively recently, and some of them still do reindeer hunting. Like, some of them still engage with that old school lifestyle, so, yeah, and I mean, they're still there in Northern Finland, like, doing it's Northern Finland, Norway, Sweden doing their thing, you know?
I guess, I mean, at the end of the day, a lot of this is just like social political stuff. Like, why, in the United States, you're if you have ancestry, if you're Navajo or Cherokee or something like that, even just a small amount, you're considered like a native person. And I think there was like a scandal recently where someone who had claimed, I think this was the Marlon Brando in the '70s sent some native woman to pick up
Oh,
his.
yeah, she was Mexican.
She was Mexican, right? Now,
Yeah, the woman that's in the famous video was Mexican.
okay, yeah, it's just like, well, she's not a Native American, she's Mexican, but like, I mean, Mexicans are people who have indigenous ancestry. It's just like from below the line. That doesn't count, you know? So, okay, fine, whatever. Uh,
Well, I mean, so the Native American thing is a little bit different too because we recognize them as, like, sub-nations.
yeah,
And
I
so
know,
in
right.
theory, they have the right to, like, say whatever whatever, like, idiot you know what I'm trying to say?
I know what you're trying to say, yes.
'Cause from the outside, we identify them as an ethnicity, you
Right,
know? But from the inside, they're like, "Oh, we're, like, self-governing nations, and we get to decide," you
sure,
know?
right,
And so
yeah,
that's why, like, these, like, details are, like they're like, "Whatever." But the reality is, like, it kinda does matter, otherwise they wouldn't get pissed off.
right, yeah,
Like,
exactly.
it's like, if blood quanta didn't matter, they wouldn't have blood quanta as a term. and
Right, right.
and they
Yeah.
check people's, blood like there are people, I think like for a lot of tribes, I think, like, I don't know about a lot. I had a friend and his mom is a fourth and she's a tribal member and he's an eighth. And so he gets all these benefits, but he's not a tribal member. So he's kind of an in-between status. And it's
Right.
just because he's an eighth, you
And
know?
I mean, it's not like this woman at the Oscars was trying to get like proceeds from the local casino or whatever. Like, she just said she was some sort of tribal
A
person.
lot of these well, a lot of these pretendians, and, like, New Yorker had an article about, like, this woman in at Berkeley who's probably a pretendian, a professor.
Right.
Um, they really are into the identity, you know?
Yes. I think this
Yeah,
is
so it's like
true. I mean, I think this is true for like not just the pretendians, but also for the Rachel Dolezal,
yeah.
uh,
Yeah,
type.
so it's like,
They really play
professor
it up.
claimed to be Native American. Did she know she wasn't? Elizabeth Hoover, who's at
Yeah.
Berkeley, she made a mistake, and, I don't know, it's like I don't know what to say because like, some of it's just, like, really funny, these cases of, like, like, some of them are like what was it? That woman who said was it she was black or no, she's Puerto Rican, and she talked in Puerto Rican street jive at panels. It turned out she was a Jewish woman from, Kansas
Yeah.
City.
Right. Right.
It's just like, the whole thing is, like, pretty hilarious. There was another guy who was a famous, Native American author, and after he died, it turned out that he was actually black or something, I think.
Yeah. A lot of I think like a lot of famous in like I think the guy from that ad, the crying Indian, you know what I'm
He was
talking
Italian, Sicilian, yeah.
about? Yeah, right. And some of the other like like famous like native peoples turned out to be, something.
Yeah, like, one of Marlon Brando's wives actually, did, um which one was it? It was Anna Kafshi did, some sort of, she was kinda dark. She was like a dark Welsh woman,
Mhm.
but, she was born Joan O'Callaghan or
Right.
Callaghan. She
Yes.
was Irish and Welsh, okay? So, yeah, so her dad was Irish and her mom was Welsh,
She had a kinda
and,
Catherine
um,
Zeta-Jones look or
she
something.
was born in India, Anglo-Indian, right?
Right.
And so she reinvented herself as Indian, and, yeah, and, like, she presented herself to Brando as that, and they got married, and then he got super pissed off when he found out that she was a pretendian as well, but of a different
Of a
sort,
different
you
sort,
know?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
I guess
And
Alec Baldwin's wife, like, faked a
oh,
Spanish.
she's not a Latina. But,
Yes.
like, again, the issue is, like, these people do actually start internalizing the identity. Well, the issue is, like, she pretends like she doesn't know certain, like, English words, but she grew up in
Right.
Boston, and she's not a Latina. She grew up in an upper middle class household in
Yeah.
Boston, Wait, yeah, like, what's her name is Hilaria Baldwin, but really she Hilaria Thomas, but she was born so Hilaria Baldwin, okay, is what she goes by now, but she was born Hillary Lynn
Right.
Hayward Thomas,
Right. Yeah.
and, she was just like a regular white girl, and then she decided to become Spanish, and, she forgets, she feigns forgetting the English words for things like cucumbers.
Right. Right. Well, I mean, ultimately, like,
It doesn't hurt anyone.
that doesn't hurt anyone. Like, some of this stuff, when you get into, like affirmative action or other things like that,
Sure.
then I think you have a bigger issue, but just to some extent, maybe.
Well, yeah, because, like, Elizabeth Warren, and
Right.
other pretendians, they really
Right.
their academic career, for example, definitely
Mhm.
got ahead because they were pretendians.
Yes.
And then, like, in Australia, you can be Aboriginal by just identifying as Aboriginal, so a bunch of white people are now, like, Aboriginal doctors,
Right. Right. And
and, like
actually, my understanding is that you can get in legal trouble if you claim that someone is not indigenous or Aboriginal, excuse me, in Australia. Like if you say that they don't, I don't think they're Aboriginal, then you can get like sued.
you've
Uh,
gotta affirm their identity.
yeah, right, right, yeah. So I
All
don't
right,
know.
speaking of, identity, should we, payball section, just talk about, like, the race war or whatever?
Let's talk about it. Race war. I'm against it.
Alright, so, I mean, do you wanna set, like okay, let me just
Yeah.
do you wanna
Okay.
set the
So
scene?
this is, this is, I guess, one of the latest internet controversies. A few days ago, maybe a week ago, something like that. This woman in, I guess it was Rochester, Minnesota,
Yeah,
named Shiloh. I forget her last name's like Shiloh Henderson or something. I don't know. Anyway, but
Hendrix.
Hendricks. But there was a viral video about her. She was at a play. She was at a playground with her kind of like toddler son, I guess, and some other. According to so the video, like most of these viral videos, it starts up halfway through. So someone's like confronting her and saying that she referred to this child using the N word, right? And her response was, "Well, he was like messing with my stuff. He was trying to steal from me, something like that." And so they got into like her and whoever was taking the video kind of got into a altercation back and forth. She used the word, like she didn't deny it. She used the word a few more times, and you know, so on and so forth. Like had a kind of defiant attitude, and apparently uh, a not GoFundMe. It's Give Send Go, Give Fund Go, some one of these like funding sites. She put up a funding page saying, because of this video, I'm being like harassed. People are threatening me. People have like leaked, my address and other information. So I'm trying to raise money in order to like relocate. Right, that's the idea. Okay, and this is kind of blown up. I think at this point, I last I checked, she had raised maybe $650,000, something like that. Right, huge amount of money, and of course, provokes a lot of commentary because, like, what did she, what did she do? You know, um, you know, she used like a racial slur, but then people were trying to destroy her for that, and so on, maybe so on and so forth. And so it's a big like internet controversy. Um, I had a couple thoughts about it. I don't know if you want me to say my piece or if you have anything you want to
Why
say.
don't you go? Why don't you go?
Yeah. Um, so first, as we know, there has been a vibe shift, and I have seen a video of President Trump saying signing an executive order that it is now legal to call people retards, and so calling people retarded or whatever is now okay. But I didn't see any executive order like that for the N word, so I'm not going to say it. um, until I get direction from President Trump on that. But so I don't know clearly this is like somehow related, I think, to maybe like the right wing backlash where people are kind of sick of these viral videos, sick of trying to like cancel people, so on and so forth. Um, I'm a little surprised. Like if she had raised $20,000, say, you know, then I don't know that I would think much of it. I'm always a little wary about these Give Fund Go or GoFundMe